Well, hey folks, and welcome to Solarcabin channel. Today I'd like to talk about buying cheap homesteading land. And this has been a real big topic that a lot of people have asked me about. I've tried to do a lot to cover it in my books and ebooks, but I think it's time I make a video about the subject. And the reason I want to talk about this in depth is because some people are rushing out and buying land to homestead without doing the research, without understanding the principle of owning land, the responsibility that comes with it. They just think the idea that they can go and be sustainable on any piece of property. And there's actually a lot of responsibility and a lot of principle behind owning property. And I want to make sure that people aren't just rushing out and buying just any piece of land because it's cheap. And then they get stuck with the land. In some cases, they can't even resell it because it's not they didn't do their research and they didn't get land where it was going to be usable. And so I want to help people in that situation and try to head off some people just going off and buying land without actually thinking about and researching what they're going to do with that property and how they're going to homestead it, how they can make themselves sustainable on that property. So that's what I'm going to cover, and it's going to take a little bit of in-depth discussion, so I hope you'll stay with me. First I want to talk about my property a bit and explain that my property the way it is now is not how it looked when I got this property, and certainly not how it looked when my granddad, who first moved up here in the late 1800s, and my dad, who lived here through the early 1900s, that's not how this property looked back then. It's changed a lot since then, and people need to understand when you buy cheap land, you get rough land. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about my property. Okay? My land is part of my granddad's old homestead and is approximately not quite an acre. It's about 3/4 of an acre that my dad split off for each of us kids when we got old enough so that we could build a homestead. Okay, and when we lived up here, there was just a dirt road when I was growing up here as a kid. That road out there was just a dirt road. About 20 years ago or so, they came through and put in blacktop road, which is nice. And we're going to talk about roads and access ways to property. But this property, when I moved here, back here, this lot was actually my brother's lot, and I traded him my lot for this lot. Just because it already had a driveway, a road access to it. But also, it was somewhat set up in a better location than what my property was. And so he traded me this for a connected lot to his property. Now, when I moved up in here, it didn't look anything like this, okay? It was completely overgrown with sagebrush. And you can see these trees are called Russian olive trees. Well, they had moved in here and they're like a big old weed, and this entire lot was completely full of those Russian olive trees that you can see there. I mean, they were just everywhere, and I had to go through here and I took out all the sagebrush, I cut down weeds, and I had to cut down hundreds of those Russian olive trees, okay, and prune them down. Now you can see I've got a nice fairly level lot. Lots of grass. You can see the cabin back there, but none of that was here. You need to understand that. This was a very rough lot. The fences, there wasn't anything here except a bunch of sagebrush, a bunch of scrub brush, and a bunch of those Russian olive trees. And I spent years, literally years, clearing out the ground and getting it all prepared before I could really do anything with it. I started out with just my camp trailer, and I cleared a little spot right there, and I put my camp trailer, and I lived in a camp trailer for 2 years. And during that 2 years, I spent all that time clearing out the lot and building fences and clearing out the ground and stuff like that. Then afterwards, I built the cabin. 2 years later, after I got the land all cleared out, that's when I built the cabin. So my property looked a lot like that across the street, which you can see over there. Okay, it had sagebrush and Russian olive trees just everywhere. That's what my property looked like. That's a lot of work. So if you're going to buy property, you need to know that you're probably going to do, especially cheap property for homesteading, you're probably going to spend your first couple of years doing nothing but just clearing the property to grow stuff. Now some people don't want to clear their land. Maybe they like it natural. Maybe they want to leave the sagebrushes and just build a cabin in the middle of the sagebrushes or live in an RV. That's fine too. I'm not trying to tell people how they need to take care of their land. What I'm saying is when you get rough, cheap land, don't expect it to be real pretty, okay? Now that road there, like I said, was a dirt road. And one of the big things that you need to think about when you purchase property is, will you have access to the property? Okay? It might be a really cheap, nice piece of land, but if you can't get to it, if you don't have a guaranteed right-of-way, a road that runs to the property, you're not going to be able to access your property. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth here, because I'm going to go through the whys, whens, and hows of how to buy property and go into each step in detail of what you need to be looking at, because I really want people, to homestead and build their little houses or live in their RVs and garden and raise animals and things like that, but I also don't want you to rush into the situation where you end up with a piece of property you can't use, and then you end up disappointed, or you end up having to pay property taxes your whole life on a piece of property because you bought the wrong piece of property. So let's talk about the how, why, whens of buying property. Okay, so you're thinking about buying some land. One of the first questions that I would ask you is, why? Why do you want to own land? That is the number one question that you really need to ask yourself. And I hope that through this video you will get a piece of paper and write down some of this, because every one of these steps that I tell you should be gone through before you ever even consider buying a piece of property. First question you need to ask yourself is, why do you want to own land? Now, there's three basic reasons that people buy property, okay? The first one is because they want to homestead, which is building a house and making their land sustainable for their lifestyle. Everybody's lifestyle is different. Not everybody wants to raise animals, not everybody wants to garden, but they want their property to be something that is sustainable, that will carry them through for a long period of time, maybe their entire lives, okay? That's called homesteading, and that's what I did with my property here. I wanted my property to be as sustainable as possible so that I could raise animals, raise a garden, and build a house that I could afford to live in and take care of my own needs for the most part. No one is 100% self-sufficient. I don't care anybody tries to tell you they're 100% self-sufficient is feeding you a load of garbage. We all still have to rely on the system to some extent. There's some things that you're not going to produce on your own piece of property, and so you're still going to have to rely on society. In some cases, maybe you'll be able to get by with co-ops within your own neighborhood or something like that. But homesteading is very possible. A lot of people do it. It's a very enjoyable lifestyle. You don't have to go without anything, and so that is a good reason for people to buy and have their own land, because if you have your own land, then you have control of that land to some extent, okay? And we're going to talk about where you buy land for homesteading is extremely important, because not all areas allow you to actually homestead. Some areas may restrict you from having animals. Some areas may restrict even the size of garden you have and the plants that you put in. So it's really important if you're homestead that you choose land that is going to be free of a lot of restrictions so that you can do what you want to do. Now, the other reason people buy land a lot of times is for recreation and vacation properties. Now, this is a good time to buy recreation and vacation property. Property is still fairly cheap here in the United States. Even in some other countries, you can get very good vacation and recreation property. Now, vacation and recreation property is generally used just specific times of the year. Maybe people only go up there when they have their 2-week vacation. Or maybe they go up and spend time when it's hunting season. Or just on the weekends. Okay, and they just want a piece of property where they can have a little place, or maybe pull their RV or their camper up in there, and that's how they use their property. And vacation rental property is a good way to start with a piece of property if people already have a house and you like where you live maybe, or that's where your work is, and we're going to talk a lot about work. And so you make your money somewhere else and you live somewhere else most of the time, but then when you want to get away from it, you go where you like to vacation on your vacation property. You don't have to pay for apartments or motels or anything like that. You pull your RV on there, or maybe have a little cabin like mine, and you go and spend your time on your vacation property, and then you go back where you make your money, or where your kids go to school, things like that. Then later on, when the kids are grown up, maybe you don't need that job, maybe you're going to retire, or you decide you want a change of lifestyle and you want a homestead. You've got that piece of property, and then you can go to that piece of property and make that your permanent living home, sell off your other house, maybe for a profit, and then go and live in your cabin or build a house on your little property, or just keep living on it in an RV, and use your vacation and rental, your vacation or recreational property as a permanent homestead. So that's another reason that people buy land. Third reason that people buy land is for an investment or security. Okay, an investment is that the property is going to go up in value. Some properties go way up in value. Okay, if you happen to get in real good on a deal around a lake, excuse me, in a very popular mountain area near a resort or something like that, your property values go up. Then it becomes an investment. Some of those people just buy it and then they sell it to someone else for their purposes, or they hold on to it and wait for it to go way up in value, and put a house on it and then resell it or something like that. That's an investment. The other reason is for security. Security means that you have a piece of property that if you do need to leave where you're currently living, you have another piece of property to go to. We all experienced the economic fall a few years ago. A lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people, 4 million people, homeless as a result of the financial collapse that cost them the house they're living in. If they'd have had a cheap piece of property somewhere, they at least would have been able to take an RV or go build a small homestead on that piece of property and have some place to go to, and would have been able to start over again. So for that reason, there's security. We call those bug out properties as well too. What if something happened to the house that you're currently living in? You lost your job and you can't afford the house payments, or an economic collapse comes along, your house burns down, God forbid, or some other calamity, a health disaster, or something else affects your finances so that you can't keep the house you're living in. If you got a piece of property, you can at least start over in an RV, a camper, or build a small cabin like mine. So we call those security properties. You're not going to do anything with it right away. You buy it for a future, whether it be for security or an investment or something like that. So those are the three basic reasons for buying a piece of property. You're going to homestead on it or build a house. Okay, you're going to use it for recreation or vacation, or it's an investment or security. Those are the three good reasons. A bad reason for buying property is just because the property is cheap. Okay, cheap property is still going to end up costing you over time. Just because you get it cheap, you're still going to end up paying property taxes on that everywhere, pretty much. You're going to pay property taxes every year. Now, the property taxes may not be that much, okay? But it's something you need to consider. We still pay property taxes. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about property taxes and why I'm not against property taxes, but why I think property taxes need to be reasonable. But you need to consider that just buying land, just because it's cheap, is not necessarily a good investment. Not all property goes up in value. Okay, you need to consider that. It also may end up being property that you can't resell later because you didn't do your due diligence and you didn't do your research, so you didn't understand why that property was not going to go up in value. Maybe you put it in an area next to a garbage, pre-garbage dump that used to be there, and so the property ends up being worthless. So just because property is cheap is not a good reason to buy property. You need to really think and write down your reasons for what you're going to do in your lifestyle and what your plans are for your future for owning a piece of property. So now let's go on and talk about what you want to consider before you start even thinking about looking at property in the way of how you're going to use that property. Okay, some things that you need to consider long before you even consider looking at a piece of property is first, how you're going to use the property. As we discussed about, are you going to homestead? Is it recreation, vacation property? Is it an investment for future security? Once you've decided that, that will depend a lot on your lifestyle. And if you've decided to homestead, which is what a lot of people are looking for and what I do with my piece of property, there's a lot of things to consider before you consider buying a piece of property. One is your source of income. okay? Just because you move to a piece of property homestead, a lot of people have this false image in their head that they're going to be 100% sustainable and so they won't need any income. Wrong. All of us who homestead have some source of income to pay for the things that we don't produce on our land, okay? Simple fact. You're going to need some income. Now, some of you, maybe you won the lottery, so you don't have to worry about income. Not likely. Most of us still work, okay? Maybe you're retired, though. Maybe you have a pension coming in. Maybe you're on Social Security. Maybe you get disability or something like that. Maybe you've got an income that you feel is reliable. I don't believe any income is ever completely reliable, and so you should keep that in mind. And we're going to talk about a little bit about how you can reduce the amount of income that you need by homesteading so that you don't need that 9 to 5 $45, $50, $60,000 an hour or dollar job that a lot of you have been working if you're homesteading. You can reduce your income so that you don't need a lot of income when you're homesteading, but you will still need income. There's still things that need to be covered. You'll still need insurance for health, okay? You'll still need gas for cars. You'll still need clothes. You're not going to produce all your own clothes on your homestead, folks. It just doesn't happen. You're unlikely to produce all of your food on your own homestead. You can produce a large percentage of it, but you're still going to need stuff from the store. You're still going to want a phone, okay? You're probably going to want internet. You might want a TV. You know, those are things that make life a little bit easier. Not everybody lives that way. Some people can live without some of those things, and that's fine. More power to them if they like that lifestyle. Nothing wrong with that. But there's no reason you have to go without those things, and that's what I'm trying to show you here, is you can have those things and have a homestead and still reduce the amount of income that you need so that you can live a more sustainable life and you're not relying on that income. Because that's the biggest problem that I see with a lot of people is they've wrapped their life up so much around that source of income that if something happens to that source of income, blooey, they've lost everything. And that's what happened in the last financial collapse. So that's what owning a piece of land can help you reduce, is your dependence on the system, dependence on those jobs. So one of the things that you need to think about is what is going to be your source of income if you buy a piece of land, where that land is, okay? Is there going to be work for you? Are you going to be able to find a job in that area where you're thinking about purchasing land? You want to check that out long before you ever consider buying a piece of land, is will there be some sort of work there for you? Now, in my book, I discuss that you can work for other people or you can start a business. Starting a business is a great idea to go along with homesteading because, for one thing, you're out of the system and you control your income, okay? It's more stable. You can have more than one source of income, and I always talk about having multiple streams of income so that if one stream of income falls apart, the other stream is there for you. So starting a business in the area where you're going to buy your land, is there customers for a business, okay? You can start, I started a small pest control business and had lots and lots of rural area customers and small town customers that were there already, and they needed the service because there's nobody doing it already. So that was a good plan for me. But also, with the invent of the internet, a lot of us have now started businesses, and we actually can run our business from home and sell our products over the internet. Through eBay, through Amazon. There's tons and tons of places. You can set up your own website and you can ship your product right to your customer, and you can ship around the world. The internet has opened up a whole new way of making an income for people to live at home on their homesteads and produce something. It should be unique. It should be something that you can make a profit from, something that people want. But there's lots of opportunities there for starting a business. But that's not something you want to go buy land and then start trying to do. You should already have that in the works. You should have these businesses ideas set up so that you know what you're doing. If you haven't run a business before, you should be doing a lot of reading on how to run and start a small business, because there's a lot of complications to that. There's taxing issues. There's business license issues. Some places are very restrictive of businesses and starting up a business. So those are all things that you want to research before you go buy the land and think you're just going to rush in and start a business. You need to know those things in advance. The other thing is, if you buy land, you need to consider that you're going to be moving probably away from friends and family. Now, in some cases, you may be moving towards friends or family. Maybe you're moving back to an area where you grew up as a kid and you know lots of people. But in some cases, you might be buying land in a completely different state, away from all your friends and family. Can you handle that? Can you handle the isolation of being away from those people? Not everybody can. Some people think they want to get away from those people and find out that they're really very attached to those people. So you really want to consider that. If you buy land that's very, very rural, away from all people, can you handle not having neighbors? Some people think, oh, I'd love not having neighbors. They make so much noise and everything like that. Well, when you have nothing but the quiet of the solitude of the mountains, you may find that it drives you crazy. Not everybody can handle that. So you need to really be aware of what you really want before you go buying a piece of rural land that's very isolated, away from friends and family and things like that. Can you handle that? If not, then maybe you want to consider buying land with other group, maybe your friends or family, or around family property or something like that, where you're at least within, 20 or 30 minutes, an hour's drive away from friends or family so you can still socialize. Now, the other thing to consider is the safety factor. The more rural the area, the farther away you are from social networks, the less security you have. You need to understand that. You want to be within an hour's distance of at least an ambulance, police, fire departments, a social network, a town so that you can resupply. You need to be able to get the stuff that you don't produce on your homestead. You don't want to drive more than an hour or two away to have to go get these resupplies. Excuse me. So you need to consider all of those things before you even consider where you're going to buy a piece of property. Having a social network adds to your security. It allows you to have an income. It provides necessary services. If you get sick, if you get hurt, it gives you a library. There's going to be county services to keep the roads clear of snow so you can actually get back and forth to your property. You're going to be able to, if you want, you can go into a town and get your resupplies, your groceries, your lumber supplies for building your house. You're going to have a library. Some other things to think about is, will you get phone service on that piece of property? Phone service for most people is a security issue. You need phone service in order to call for help if something happens, to stay in touch with family. If you have phone service, then you also have internet service. Internet service is necessary if you're going to run a business online. Most of us have a big portion of our lives on our social networks online, okay? I run 2 businesses online, so I have to have internet. If you get phone service, or at least if you get satellite service in the area, then you can have internet and you can have phone service so that you have the security and you can run a business. Those are all things that you should consider long before you ever even consider a piece of property. Go to the area where you're thinking about buying the piece of property. If you're looking at a certain piece of property, go there and make sure you understand where the town is. Does it have ambulance? Does it have schools for your kids? Do they take care of the roads in the area? Does it have libraries? Are you going to be able to buy your supplies? Can you get cell phone or phone service there? Can you get internet service there? Check out all of those things long before you ever consider buying a piece of property. All right, so now we've talked about the basics of things that you need to think about before you buy a piece of property. Now let's start talking about where to look for pieces of property.